This video is based on a true personal account and documented human rights reports. The views expressed are those of the survivor and do not constitute legal or medical advice. Content is intended for educational and documentary purposes to highlight personal experiences of faith and resilience. The journey to Beijing. It took me several months to think things through. In October 1999, I decided to go to Beijing to appeal to the central government. In theory, it was a legal way for a Chinese citizen to express their concerns. In reality, I was almost completely unprepared. I got on the train without knowing where I would go, without knowing anyone in Beijing, and without any clear plan. On my first night, I found an unfinished university construction site and took shelter there. I spread a newspaper on the ground and lay down to sleep. I was used to the mild climate of Shanghai. The October cold in Beijing woke me in the middle of the night. I had to stand up and walk back and forth just to keep warm. At the time, I had no idea that I was already being watched. Only later did I learn that the central authorities had issued a policy punishing local officials if anyone from their region went to Beijing to appeal for Falun Gong. Some people from my university had been sent ahead and were waiting near Tiananmen Square. If I appeared there, I would have been arrested immediately. I later heard that they had been waiting there all day. The next day, I found myself trapped in a dilemma. If I went home, I could be arrested and permanently banned from coming to Beijing. But if I stayed, I would soon run out of money. I felt that I still had not accomplished what I had come to do. So I decided to stay in Beijing and look for work. At night, I slipped into university classrooms to sleep. Before long, I found a job selling electronic products door to door. I was promised a commission of 100 yuan for each item sold. But after more than a month, I hadn't sold a single product. I had only 5 yuan left in my pocket. I bought a few plain steamed buns and ate just one a day to survive. My boss arranged for me to stay in a dormitory with 6 other employees. Everyone there knew that I practiced Falun Gong, but no one reported me to the police. Perhaps the way I lived and treated others spoke louder than what they had heard from the media. I worked hard, helped whenever I could, and people especially appreciated that I took the initiative to cook for everyone. Gradually, I earned enough to support myself and was promoted to a low-level manager. One day, while shopping at a wholesale market, I mentioned that I practiced Falun Gong. A vendor told me that another practitioner also worked there. It took a long time to find him, but that moment meant everything to me. For the first time, I connected with the Falun Gong community in Beijing. In 2001, the company I worked for went bankrupt. I thought the persecution might have eased, so I called home. My mother was extremely worried. Before leaving, I had only left a letter saying I was going to Beijing, and then I disappeared without any contact. She demanded that I return to Shanghai immediately. When I returned, I discovered that my university had expelled me simply for going to Beijing to appeal. even though, in reality, I had never even made it to the government's petition office. The persecution did not ease. It intensified. I knew the situation in Beijing was dangerous, but I wanted to help. Earlier, I had asked fellow practitioners what I could do. They told me they needed people to break through internet censorship, download materials, and print information to expose the persecution. Many older practitioners were not familiar with computers, but for me, this was not difficult. I returned to Beijing, rented a small apartment, and bought a computer and a printer. I printed materials and passed them to others for distribution. At first, everything was spontaneous. Soon, small material production sites began appearing across China. Before long, I started distributing the materials myself. It was terrifying. The entire city felt tense and oppressive. Police, both in uniform and plainclothes, were everywhere. On the streets, in subway stations, at checkpoints. Every time I carried materials with me, I felt immense pressure. If I were caught, I could be sent straight to prison or a forced labor camp. Then, what I feared most happened. On a freezing day in December 2001, as I was walking along Beijing's North 3rd Ring Road, 2 men blocked my path. When I stepped back, I realized others were already behind me. I had no way out. They shoved me to the ground, handcuffed me, and pulled a hood over my head. What followed was arrest and torture. Detention and torture. I was taken to an unknown location for interrogation. Several officers questioned me about my connections with other Falun Gong practitioners. I told them nothing. Then the beating began. One officer pressed a baton against my neck so I couldn't scream. Another struck my back and legs repeatedly. He was vicious. The batons were made of iron, wrapped in rubber. Each blow caused unbearable pain, but large bruises didn't appear right away. A way to hide the abuse. Just before I lost consciousness from lack of oxygen, they would stop and let me breathe for a few seconds. Then they would clamp my neck again and continue beating me. At that moment, I realized they knew exactly what they were doing. They were disturbingly skilled. It was then that I truly understood how cruel the Chinese Communist Party was. I suddenly saw that the party was nothing like the image it portrayed in books and propaganda. These officers had no humanity. They threatened to kill me if I didn't cooperate. "We'll hang you from a tree all night," they said. "Then dig a hole and bury you alive." How could an ordinary police officer say something like that? It was unimaginable. They made another threat. "We'll send you to northern China." At the time, I didn't understand what that meant. Years later, I learned that northern China was where the CCP began, harvesting organs from imprisoned Falun Gong practitioners. After the beating, they tied me up, stuffed me into a sack, and transported me to a secret detention center. I didn't know where I was, And even if I did, there was nothing I could do. The building bore an official-sounding name: Beijing Legal Education Center. In reality, it was a brainwashing and torture facility. Many such centers existed across China to transform Falun Gong practitioners, to force them to abandon their faith. According to accounts later published by Minghui.org, people could be detained there for days, months, or longer without any legal process. I was kept in solitary confinement. A camera pointed at my face around the clock. I had no contact with the outside world. I refused to submit. I immediately began a hunger strike in protest. But the guards treated it as an excuse for another form of torture: force feeding. Several people pinned me down on a chair, while another shoved a long rubber tube through my nose and into my stomach. The pain was excruciating. I was force-fed many times. Once, the tube went into my lung instead of my stomach. A guard acting as a medical worker noticed and pulled it out. If he hadn't, I likely would have died. Another form of torture was freezing. In the middle of winter nights, guards would burst into my cell, throw open the windows, and pour buckets of icy water over me. My clothes and body were soaked as I stood there in the freezing air. They also spread rumors, claiming that other Falun Gong practitioners had already given up their beliefs and begun cooperating. They just want you to think that if everyone else has done it, you should too. But I still refused to renounce my faith. So they put me on what they called the dead man's bed. I was tied to the bed for more than 7 months. My body became extremely weak. My heartbeat slowed dangerously. My blood pressure dropped to 40/70. Only when they thought I was about to die did they untie me. They didn't want to be held responsible for my death. My muscles had severely deteriorated. I didn't know how to stand anymore. I didn't know how to move my arms. About 2 months later, I was transferred to a forced labor camp, officially called the Beijing Tuanhe Re-Education Through Labor Camp. No longer afraid. By then, I felt that I had let go of my fear. Fear of pain and fear of death. There was nothing left that the guards could use to threaten me. And it seemed they understood that. I even began practicing the Falun Gong exercises inside my cell. Through that, my body slowly began to recover. No one could stop me. But once I regained some strength, the torture resumed. This time, it was the tiger chair. I was forced to sit on a tiny stool for nearly 18 hours a day. It looked simple, but the pain was unbearable. Even so, it still could not break me. In January 2004, after 1 year of forced labor, I was released. I returned to Shanghai. Several years later, I managed to escape China. and come to the United States. Only after arriving here did I truly understand what freedom means. Here, I can freely practice Falun Dafa. I can meditate peacefully in a park without fear. I can even march alongside thousands of others through the busy streets of Manhattan. Scenes like this would have been unimaginable in China. I came to understand that much of the persecution relies on one thing: fear. The party exploits people's instinct for self-preservation and their fear of consequences. But I discovered that the reality is the opposite. Only when I truly let go of fear did the persecutors begin to retreat. They no longer dared to torture me further. I am deeply grateful to the United States for giving me the chance to live with dignity. In this land of freedom, I have finally experienced respect, basic human rights, and freedom of belief. Rights that every person is born with. I hope that one day, all people living in mainland China will be able to experience the same freedom, dignity, and peace